Hello out there in Radio Land. This is Michael. This is the Street Preacher's Corner podcast, the podcast that isn't afraid to think or to stand alone if necessary. We're going to do something a little differently. I try to stay away from too many topical events, too many current events. It makes your stuff come across as really dated, and unless you're going to talk about a principle involved, you're just going to be just one more voice talking about the thing that everybody else is talking about. And it's good for clicks and it's good for views or whatever, but I don't know. I've never gone to chase that sort of thing. Having said that, that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, recently, of course, depends on when you're listening to this, a curious thing happened in Iowa. The Iowa State Legislature at the Capitol building, they had a multi-denominational holiday display kind of thing set up. And a group of Satanists successfully lobbied / bullied / browbeat the Ohio government to put a statue up of Baphomet in the Capitol building under the auspices of exercising freedom of religion. And that did not get the coverage that I thought it was going to get when it happened. There's been actually several victories in that area on the side of the Satanists in recent years, and so this was just one more thing. Now, it's worth mentioning, though, going into this, as we discuss this, that these Satanists, they aren't Satanists. By that, I mean they disavow any worship of Satan or even any belief in Satan. I mean, it's literally on their website. These people, the Satanic Temple of Iowa, or Satanic Temple of, I forget what their name is, they are the same sort of atheistic chowderheads who yell "Hail Satan" at street preachers through car windows before chuckling and congratulating themselves on how clever and original they are. This happens to us probably once a week. Some chucklehead at a red light will yell "Hail Satan" as the light turns green. They pull away, and you always see them, high five at each other in the mirror. We get this all the time, and I do mean all the time. Actually, not that you asked. But in almost 30 years of public ministry and hundreds of chowderheads, I've met maybe 3 people who I believe were really and knowingly devil worshippers. So that's something. But back to the dilemma in Iowa. This satanic group, while acknowledging that they don't believe in a devil, insisted that the Iowa taxpayers had to allow a display of their beliefs, of which they have none. They believe nothing, and so to honor their belief in nothing, we must, of course, allow a statue of a thing they don't believe in as a way to honor beliefs that they don't actually have. Make sense so far? I thought it would. Now, the various public figures expressed a feeling of entrapment by the situation based on what I believe is an incorrect assessment of what's really going on here. For example, the Iowa governor said we should pray over the situation. That's certainly a valid response. Different church groups, held vigils and did different things. Okay, that's fine. That's what you want to do. But my take on things, perhaps a little different than most people's, my take is that all this could have been handled completely differently because it's obvious to me, among other things, that if no religion is represented, then this can't be a freedom of religious or a freedom of religion issue. So what this group here, the satanic group is, and you go to their website, you look at their stuff. I've looked at their stuff, I've looked at other people's stuff. There's a group in Michigan just like them. It's the sort of network that would not have existed pre-internet days, where idiots are able to find each other. This group is in reality just a collection of trolls who are gaming the system and using other people's commitment to freedom to have fun at their expense. It is the same sort of self-immolating behavior that some people claim is the price of a free society. In other words, people say we have to allow this or else we're not really free. Well, maybe. I'll get back to that. It's interesting, though, to me at least, that a group of people who believe that man is the measure of all things didn't choose a statue of a man as their totem, their symbol, their I guess totem is the right word. Uh, Now, these folks, while claiming no outside interference, right? There is no devil, there is no God, there are no spirits, nothing is pushing us, pulling us, prodding us, nothing is influencing us. This is their claim. So, while claiming this, they chose on their own, not a statue of a man, not a statue of their founder, not a statue of themselves. They chose, as the image to represent them out in the world, an ancient Canaanite deity. I mean, what are the odds? This is as good a time as any to plug the Lizard People episode we did here on the Street Preachers podcast. And if I remember, I'll put the link in the description because apparently that's the thing people should do if they refer to things. But even if I was to allow that the freedom of religion angle covers things that aren't religious, it's a dumb assertion, but I'll play your silly game for now. Any sane or historically literate people would have to acknowledge that freedom of religion as a concept is an entirely Christian concept. The Bible presents a gospel that must be freely accepted by men who are fully persuaded in their own minds. The Bible is against compulsion in spiritual matters. I mean, there are rules, there are laws, etc., etc. But the matter of belief, the matter of that sort of thing is entirely an individual choice. And that approach towards spiritual things bled over into secular things. Out of that approach grows freedom and tolerance. In other words, I want the freedom and liberty to go present the gospel to somebody. And so, as a result of me having that liberty and me defending that liberty for myself, I wind up defending the liberty of people who disagree with me. And if you want to say that's the price you pay for a free society, sure, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. You know, we go door knocking, not as much as we used to because people are weird since COVID. But anyway, we used to go door knocking a lot more. And, of course, there would be, people are under weird impressions about things. They think things are illegal when they aren't. And you have the constitutional right to go knock on a man's door and attempt to persuade him of whatever. He can hang a no soliciting sign. He can hang a whatever sign. They can put a sign outside the subdivision that says, all visitors register, blah, blah. They do whatever they want. But that constitutionally, it has been won in the Supreme Court that you can go to a man's door and knock on his door and leave something there. Now, if he tells you to leave, you got to leave. But up until that moment he tells you to leave, you have a certain amount of right to be there. And that was established in the 40s by the Supreme Court of the United States while defending Jehovah's Witnesses, of which I have no affection whatsoever. My point is that the freedom to and legal protections to spread their false gospel also benefits me. And so my freedom and expression to present a true gospel also protects those that are opposed to me. And that really is the price of a free society. I'm getting way off track. So like I said, freedom of religion is an entirely Christian concept. If we were living under Islam, or we were in Roman Catholic controlled Europe back in the 1400s, or even a society of Baphomet worshippers, what you would not see is a multi-denominational holiday display in the state capitol. It would not be allowed. The freest societies in the history of the world have been societies that have been shaped or influenced not by Judeo-Christian values, whatever that means, but rather by saved, born-again Christians who practiced evangelism. Every free society in the world is either the result of that, or it's modeled after one of those societies that's the result of that. There are literally no exceptions. Now, the reason why that is because the Bible is true, and the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So God gives a nation liberty. God gives a people liberty. God gives, there's various kinds of liberty in life. There's political liberty, there's economic liberty, and there's spiritual liberty. But all those liberties are a gift from God, and all those liberties come down, every good and perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, all that great stuff. And God gives you those liberties so that you are at liberty to do that which is right. That's true of your economic liberty, true of your political liberty, and it is certainly true of your spiritual liberty. God gives you spiritual liberty so that you can honor Him and serve Him without compulsion from an outside force. Now, what that does, though, is that reveals the heart of the individual that has the liberty. Because if you're suddenly free to do whatever you want to do, what you wind up doing reflects a lot of times your priorities. In fact, I would say it always reflects your priorities. So God brings people back from the captivity of some kind, speaking of the nation of Israel, and they're at liberty in their own land. And one of the first things they do is they start worshiping idols because that's what they want to do. That reveals their heart. And so that liberty, when God gives you liberty so you can do right, and you do wrong with it, then God starts to slowly remove that liberty in a lot of different ways. So if you're an American and you look at your country in a whole, you have to ask yourself, how much longer can we remain free? I mean, it has been slowly decreasing since the 1860s, depending on where you look. So, in the thorny matters of how to function in a pluralistic, free society, there are a lot of different ideas. I recently heard a man take the tack that since God is the author of spiritual liberty, and since spiritual liberty begets all other liberties, that we owe the devil worshippers nothing. We owe the secularists nothing. We owe the people that preach false gospels nothing. They will have to be content to ride on the coattails of the liberty that we secure for them by our righteousness and by the way we honor God. That was his approach. It's an interesting idea, I have to admit. So the idea was that if we yield ground to them, it is what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up to lose our liberties. It's an interesting idea, but I don't think exclusion is necessary, at least not in this one situation. At least not. We're going to keep circling back to the statue in the Iowa State Capitol because I think what happened and the way they looked at it and the way they handled it is very important and very telling about a misunderstanding that we have about liberty. So, and I also think there's a better approach that they could have used, which I'll get to in a moment. Real liberty or real history is messy, and you can certainly find oppressive theocratic regimes who hid their tyranny behind a Bible and enforced an official form of orthodoxy. If you want a great example of that, check out my podcast on the Puritans versus the Quakers. That happened right here in America. You can go into the history of Virginia. You can find where Baptist preachers were executed for preaching in public. I mean, you can find all kinds of things going on when men are still men, and when they are allowed to oppress other people, they will, and they'll use a Bible to do it if necessary. And so it'd be easy for the skeptic to say, "Well, you Christians aren't any better," and that's probably true. And you Christians have done the same thing, and that's certainly true. But if you look at those oppressive periods of where a religious majority, where a saved group of people that believe the Bible. I'm not talking about Roman Catholic dominated Europe. I'm talking about pre-colonial America and colonial America, where there was a overwhelming majority of saved people who maybe had their doctrine weird or maybe had their approach, their priorities out of whack. You can look at those things and you can certainly find oppression. You can certainly find a loss of liberty. You can certainly find horrible things going on. But I tell you what's different. If you keep looking at that same period of history, if you just sit back and watch, you go through and I cover this in a lot of my stuff on church history. It almost always has a happy ending if saved people are involved. What you will find is that those same saved men who are part of that machinery and part of that oppression, some of them, their consciences will begin to be pricked about how they're conducting themselves, and what there will be a course correction, and liberty will once again flourish. These people will look at the situation and they go, we are doing this and we are wrong to do this. We are not right with Jesus to do this. We need to get back to honoring Jesus, and we'll honor Jesus by XYZ, by ceasing whatever activity is going on. I mean, by comparison, say, when is the last time a bunch of Baalites said, we ought not be killing these babies, we're not right with Baal when we do it? You are right with Baal when you're killing babies, because Baal is in the baby-killing business. People leave Baalite worship. They don't try to reform it. Christians try to reform and try to get back on track when the Holy Spirit points them out to that they're wrong. But anyway, so there's an idea, especially in America, that a man, by virtue of his humanity and as part of his creation, can and could worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience. However imperfectly we have lived that ideal still exists. But I think somewhere along the way, in our attempt to be tolerant, in our attempt to be understanding, in our attempt to be accommodating to those who would destroy us, I think we've picked up some strange ideas on how to implement that ideal, and it's given some insincere scorners the power to troll us and accuse us of not living up to rules that we never should have agreed to in the first place. So let me just take a little aside here and just cover something that I've covered before here or someplace else. I lose track of what I've said and who I said it to. Rights exist outside of the Constitution. Rights exist outside of any codification of them, any sort of thing like that. What you see in history, or what you see in philosophy, or however you want to apply this, is that if a man owns himself, then a lot of other things flow from that. And I think property rights are a biblical thing. The very idea that God put it down in writing, thou shalt not steal, means that God acknowledges that there are some things that belong to you that don't belong to somebody else. And there's some things that belong to somebody else that don't belong to you. There's some clear lines drawn. God is in favor of property rights. God is in favor of ownership. And since God holds a man accountable for his actions, that man owns those actions. So you have property rights because you own yourself, and your property is an extension of your self-ownership. You have the right to, you own your words, so free speech. You own your thoughts, freedom of expression. You own your association, so freedom of association. All those rights, they all come back to the idea of self-ownership. And since you're going to be held accountable to God for how you worship God, then you have freedom to worship God according to the dictates of your own conscience. Now, that's a couple of steps back from what people usually, where people usually land on this stuff. That's usually a couple of steps back from how far they want to take it, unless you're a libertarian. A lot of people run back to the Constitution, but then outside the Constitution, predating the Constitution, you still have this idea of self-ownership. Excuse me. So I think we owe it to ourselves as a free society, as a free people, to sort this out, because scorners and trolls, they're not going away. In fact, given the increasing godlessness of our society and the overall trend in churches away from real in-the-trenches evangelism, I think we're going to be seeing more Baphomet statues, not less. They did this thing. It got them what they wanted. They got to tweak the nose of the giant, so to speak, and they got away with it. And so they're going to do it again and again and again, because now the precedent obviously has been set. So let's talk about the other side of the equation. Let's talk about manger scenes. I am not a pro-Christmas guy, and for the most part, I could not care less about manger scenes, especially since most of them are woefully inaccurate according to the Bible. I am, however, biased. I am biased in favor of Jesus and against Baphomet. Where I part company with a lot of folks is a manger scene in the public square isn't really a religious statement. It is a values statement. Let me explain. Let's say you put a manger scene up in your front yard. You can do so not because of freedom of religion, but because it's your front yard. It's the same freedom that allows you to put up a Santa statue or a Grinch statue or a statue of Eleanor Roosevelt slow dancing with J. Edgar Hoover. It is your property. It is your choice. It is your values that get represented and displayed. Every year I threaten my family that I'm going to get a black Santa Claus statue and put it in the front yard just to just to express the value that I'm a cynical smart aleck. I haven't done it yet because I'm also, one of my other values is I don't want to spend $200 on something that's going to left out in the rain and get ruined. But anyway, so your yard, your choice, your values. Do whatever you want in your own property, right? If it bothers somebody else, that's unfortunate, but it's still your property. And the fact that they are bothered does not trump your right to do what you want with your own stuff. This used to be common sense here in America, the land of the free and the home of the whopper, but it's not anymore. So then what about places that belong to all of us? Sidewalks, squares, parks, courthouses, government buildings, the Iowa State Legislature building. Well, I admit it can get a little thorny, but let me give you a real world example of something that I think establishes my point. Now, in our community, in an adjacent town, about, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 miles away from where I'm sitting, there is a Veterans Memorial Park, which is not nearly as impressive as it sounds. It's a patch of grass between the railroad tracks and some old houses. It's not really big enough to put anything else on. It's maybe a block long and maybe half a block wide. It's not really and so it's been a park for I probably my whole life, at least since I was a teenager. So a few years ago they designated it as the Veterans Memorial Park. And in this park are a couple of benches and a flagpole and some small displays that are set up to sort of honor the various military branches. It is a tangible expression of the values of that community. In other words, if you were to drive through that town and you saw that park, you would say, oh, these people in this town, they're really into honoring the veterans. It's important to them. They put it out there where everybody can see it. It is a tangible expression of the values of that community. I submit to you that any display on land owned by all of us is functionally, principally, the same thing. It is an expression of a value. It is a visible monument to something a town, a county, a state, a nation agrees is important. That doesn't mean everybody in the community, however large the community, holds it in the same esteem. But as a general statement of what sort of people are we, that's a good as indicator as any of what sort of people you are, or what sort of people you feel like you should be, or maybe if enough time has gone by, the sort of people you used to be. Okay, we're still on the same page. All right, good. So of course the next question would be, and that's a fair question, is who decides? Who decides what gets put in places that belong to everybody? Well, my answer to that would be, it's not a perfect answer, but it's better than what we got going on now. My answer would be that everybody decides what gets put in places that belong to everybody. So, if for example, if someone proposes a flagpole or a manger scene or a Baphomet statue, you decide that however your community decides such things. Put it to a vote, put it to the city council, put it to the state legislature. Just make sure that directly or indirectly the community has a say. I mean, we can't do everything at all. We can't have the Veterans Memorial Park also be 12 other things. And if your Baphomet statue gets the votes, then it's a reflection of what is important to your community. And God help you if it is. Now that means if you're in the minority, your particular totem might not wind up in the public square. And why should it? I mean, your rights aren't being trampled. You're not being censored. The Roman Catholic Church isn't breaking into your house and stealing your Bibles and boring your eye sockets out and pouring hot lead in them, which did happen, by the way. Check out my podcast on the Inquisition. You're not a Baptist preacher that's not being put in jail in Colonial Virginia. I mean, the fact that your Baphomet statue did not wind up in the park or in the state capitol does not mean your rights are being censored and your rights are being trampled on, because what you don't have the right to do is make all of us support an idea or an image that doesn't reflect the values of the community. So as an end cap of this whole story that started this train of thought, this Iowa statue story, a guy named Michael Cassidy apparently beheaded that statue and then turned himself into the cops, where he was booked on a charge of fourth-degree mischief, which I don't even know what that means. Doesn't even sound like a thing. It sounds like that was the lowest possible thing that they could charge him with. He went to the state capitol, he beheaded the Baphomet statue. The state legislator people had to call the Satanic Temple and say, "Hey, man, somebody damaged your statue beyond repair." And so Michael Cassidy, by then, had turned himself into the police. So here's what I would say. I am not in favor of destroying other people's property, even if the other people are insincere or stupid or out of bounds. So you've got to deal with Michael Cassidy, the fact that he broke the law. There's a law that says you can't go around cutting people's heads off other people's stuff. So you got to honor that law. So what you do is you put Michael Cassidy on trial. You find him guilty. I mean, he turned himself in. What are you going to do? Maybe it's not a trial's not even necessary. You fine him, and then you take up a collection from the community to pay the fine. There is, after all, more than one way to display one's values. And if I knew a guy had done that, and I knew he needed a couple of bucks, I would throw him a couple of bucks. Just saying. But hey, what do I know? Well, this is Michael. This has been the Street Preacher's Corner podcast. Obviously, a lot more could be said about this topic, as well as almost anything else we cover. But thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in this endeavor. And, yeah, as always, I will see you on the other side.